71 war. 50 years have gone past and we are still talking about it because obviously a lot of new people, either they join the forces and they want to know the history, and those who haven't joined the forces still want to know, as Indians, what India did 50 years back. As also the world would want to know, because South Asia is increasingly becoming more significant. So as a result, how things have panned out over a period of time, the world has a perception about India. The world has perception about the Indian Defense Forces. They understand that a war was fought where 93,000 prisoners were taken and a nation was born through liberation called Bangladesh. But what went through was greatly perceived in a particular way by the Western world and by the adversaries. Squarely, I'm talking about Pakistan and China. And today, as we talk about the industrial age 4.0, it actually is information age. People are glued onto media. And we saw when the Gulf War came in, it was largely called a media war. Why was it called a media war? There was nothing happening on ground. Whatever was happening on ground was only known to the people because television had come in. And the number of war correspondents, the television channels, and also the Americans wanted this war to be seen. And their perception was not only about what the Americans are doing, but also what the American equipment, military hardware is capable of doing. So as a result, media became the next big thing in war, and the war shifted from the actual war, which was territorial in nature, which had political objectives, which had military means and objectives to be achieved, but also largely it became a war of perception. Media shapes the perception. So there are two ways of looking at it. Media reports whatever is happening, credible or whatever perception they want people to have about the actual events. A victory can be seen or made to look like a defeat, and a defeat can be made to look like victory. It depends on how lawyer you are fighting a case. So as a result, this powerful tool today, in today's age, can actually decide on the outcomes. And even you go to the Security Council, I suppose it is all perception which is being thrown around. And based on the perceptions, decisions are taken. Based on the perceptions, we have the global groupings coming in together to side one party or the other and take decisions. The weapons of mass destruction became a big affair when a case was being built up to attack Iraq. Whether weapons of mass destruction were found or not was another matter altogether. But that was less reported, that they were not found. Yet to justify war and to demonstrate the success of war, the media came in a big way. So today I have a very distinguished panel sitting here with me, and they need no introduction. Sir Mark Tully, on my left, has been the head of the BBC from 1964 in India, and he had a career of 30 years as BBC A reporter, and then he became the head. And next to him is Vishnu from TV Nine Network, who has also been in BBC for 12 years. And on my right side is Subroto Chattopadhyay. He actually is an enthusiast. He's into perception. He makes films, he interviews people. He's running Brains Trust. He also has Peninsula Studio, so largely into perception. Rather than talking about only what media did and what media can do, let's today talk about what media is actually meant to be doing and what media lands up doing. Sometimes they're bidding, sometimes, you heard about Christine Fair saying that there are people who have paid the lobbies to build perceptions in America, and the Congress takes a decision. So I'm not going there, but it can happen that the decisions can be based on what the think tanks talk about and what media actually communicates to the people at large. So I will first go to Subroto Chattopadhyay to say that you have been a watcher, you are an enthusiast, you are into perception. And I think by interviewing so many people, you have made certain perception and observations of national security events, but at the moment we're talking about 1971 war. So I will request you to first talk about the power of media and how you used it and how you think media being a tool to shape the future of our country and the perception in the world. Subroto Chattopadhyay.
So, firstly, I'd like to thank, there are 4 people in the audience who I'd like to thank. I'd first like to thank General Cardozo. I'd like to thank Admiral Anup Singh. I'd like to thank Squadron Leader Rana Chinna. And I was deeply inspired by Sandeep Unnithan when he launched his book on the Bangladesh war. So what we have done is, because of these officers who fought the war, they have told their story. They were either battalion commanders or they were company commanders in the 1971 war. They have told their story. I have to tell you that I discovered Bangladesh war at my age. I did not know about it. And since I'm at the US, I have to mention that it is one of the most fascinating wars and one of the most decisive victories any military anywhere in the world had got ever. And my worry is, and I was talking to Sandeep outside, that he made a mention to General B.K. Sharma that this program should have actually happened in a college or a school anywhere in India, because people should know what happened. And we are blessed with such fine minds in the military, and if you were to hear their story, it's very important that this story is told. We are talking about the lessons and so on. Never in the history has it happened that a military has walked in, done its job, and fallen back. If I have your permission, we have a little video. It's about the speakers and what they say. May I have the permission of playing it? Okay. So if Rishabh can play the video, and then I'll sort of be silent.
In about 7 minutes or 5 minutes, I don't know. I mean, I didn't even keep record of time, but I think it was a very, very quick insight by personalities talking about the operation, throwing in maps, throwing in pictures, throwing in opinions, and also emoting through music the great achievement of the Indian Army in such a short clip that you've done. Before I come to the perceptions that you have made out of all these interviews, I will go to Vishnu first, that you have been in BBC and now you are active TV reporter and you are also into analyzing, you're a correspondent and you think about it. I need to understand from you that when you sit in your studios or you go to the field, do you know the kind of impact that it can have on people, on governments, on decision makers of what you're reporting? What kind of accountability do you work towards? Or do you have an aim of this is the impact that you want to create? That now that we are in the information age, what do you have to the people that accountability brings in, perception brings in, and what is your aim with which you work? Your comments, please.
So, 26/11 changed a lot of things. Before that, when a terror attack happened or a war story happened, media was on its own and saying things, showing things as they pleased. But 26/11 made us realize that this couldn't go on forever because, as you know, pictures were being broadcast live. People were actually in the line of fire, reporters. They were standing next to commanding officers who were giving out orders. They were giving out information, what was happening inside the hotels or in Chabad house as it happened. And not only us, even people in Pakistan were watching and then coordinating attacks at that time. So after the 26/11 incident, standard operating procedures were decided by the government and the media. And a few things were made, well, should I say, important that when we go out and report, or we are showing it on television, or we are writing about it, we should keep in mind. The first was obviously, is it in national interest, what we are going to be showing or saying? If it was, the answer was yes, then it was to be factual, or absolutely factual and objective. The other thing was, we would never show anything live, any action anymore. It will have to be deferred. So we'll record stuff, keep it with ourselves, And then after a lapse of a few minutes, maybe even 30 minutes, they will go out and will say that this is not being broadcast live. This is what we received some time ago. So that there was a lapse of time between what had happened and when we were showing it. So there was no danger of people monitoring and then taking evasive or responsive actions on the basis of that. Again, electronic media especially has a habit to run to relatives, families, and start asking questions that agitate them. We were requested not to do that, and even if we recorded those people, to again defer it and not inflame passions. And you see, when a reporter reports or a debate is happening, fiery debates these days, there's a loop that goes on, which is basically archival. Sometimes that can agitate and inflame passions. So we were requested not to do it, if possible. If it was absolutely essential, then you had to put the word file photographs or archives very, very prominently so that people not take it otherwise. So media became responsible after 26/11.
So what you're talking about, the contemporary media in India, or maybe BBC, you've been with BBC for 12 years. Very short comment on how do you feel to have Sir Mark Tully sit next to you?
Oh my God. I went to BBC when Mark was already in Delhi reporting. He was well known all over the world and obviously in India. And when I went to BBC, people asked me if I knew Mark. I said, I know Mark. I haven't never met him, but I've heard him a lot. Because when I was growing up, when 71 happened, I was all of 11 years old. And I don't know why it happened, but I was given the responsibility every day in the school assembly to tell people what had happened during the war in the last 24 hours, which I would cull from newspapers and from Mark's reports that we heard in BBC. And I was given 10 minutes every day in the assembly, and I would actually narrate to the assembly what had happened in the last 24 hours. For me, it was like a cricket match. I was giving out the numbers of fighters who had been shot down, what the progress that the army had made. So I became a second-hand reporter, actually, at that age. But things like, names like Nat, Vijayant, Nirmaljit Sekhon, they are etched in my mind since then. So going to BBC was great. I mean, my father wanted me to qualify for civil services, which I deliberately didn't. So when I got selected for BBC World Service, he was very happy. He said, "Chalo, Indian Administrative Service mein nahi hua, World Service mein ho gaya."
Okay, thank you, Vishnu. I turn to Subroto. Again, actually, I'm referring to Sir Mark Tully. You go and interview people and you form your perceptions. If you are to interview Sir Mark Tully and extract from him in 1 minute that as what you do in making very short films, what would be your most powerful question to Sir Mark Tully?
I think very few people, he's lived in India all his life, but very few people have a deep, balanced insight into what has happened in India, and he has a great historical sense in a very balanced manner. I have read much of what he has written, so it'll be a great honor and a privilege that we were to get that out of him, because there are very few people who have, in a very balanced manner, seen what's happened in India over the last 60 years.
Okay, so thank you. If I were to frame a question for Sir Mark Tully, a short question, because I would want you, sir, to talk about it in your language, what you feel about your being in India. Around 30 years of your association with BBC in India, of course you were not always here, and you would give those reasons, that you actually saw external emergency of 1971, and you also saw internal emergency in a country. And if you were to form your impressions about your experience in India, and then we are talking about the war of 1971, which was a watershed movement, I would want you to actually come out today to say, what does your heart say of your being a British living in India as an Indian with the Indian heart, and the Western world, how you were being controlled, were you being tutored, or you stood independent reporter as an independent agency in India? Your comments, please.
Well, General Saab, you've set a huge agenda. But I think the first thing I would like to say is this, and that is that we have Vishnu here. The BBC is a very large organization. A person like me is only the front of the BBC. I get all the glory, which is very unfair, really, because I remember time and time again the work that the Hindi service, for instance, did back in London, the help that they gave, the mistakes that they stopped me making. I remember vividly when Narasimha Rao became Prime Minister, and Narasimha Rao had personally told me that he was ill and he was not going to contest the election. So I said on the air that Narasimha Rao is not even a member of Parliament. And I got a very rapid kick in the pants from the Hindi service, who said he is. He's a member of the Rajya Sabha. So I think it's very important that I don't get a big head or swollen head, and that I make it absolutely clear that the BBC, I have been made by the BBC. The BBC has not been made by me. On the question of the 72 war in particular and what we were aiming to do, we were aiming, as we always do, to provide balanced coverage. But it's very difficult to do that because for one reason, we were not getting real reports from the Pakistan side of what was happening in Bangladesh. Here, I must mention people who never get the credit they should do. We were getting reports from our stringers, that is the local reporters. And I can tell you, in any story which I have worked on in India, I have been always assisted without any doubt. The story would not have been complete without the assistance of a local reporter working for us freelance. And the tragedy of the Bangladesh War, one of the tragedies of the Bangladesh War was that a stringer of ours called Nizamuddin was brutally shot, murdered, executed, used whatever like, with the other intellectuals in Bangladesh. And he was chosen because of what he'd reported for the BBC. And now, I'd just like to add one other point about perception. In a war, particularly, the perception on the of what the BBC is reporting, basically, is to a large measure, the public perception, influenced actually by whether the BBC is sending news that country wants to hear, or whether the story is going against that country. I remember, when I went into East Pakistan, as it was, after the Pakistani army had moved out of the barracks and the atrocities had started, I was told in order to be balanced, I had to go to West Pakistan. When I was in East Pakistan, Bangladeshis, or East Pakistanis as they were treating me like a hero. When I got into West Pakistan, I was shown in the office, by Radio Pakistan, I was shown the various pseudonyms which were given to the BBC in West Pakistan because the story was going against them. And one of the synonyms, if you forgive me, is a very military synonym. We were called the British Bullshit Corporation, with the British Bakwas Corporation, and other such synonyms like that. So when the public perception, in what I'm trying to say, is influenced by whether the public likes the story or not. And I think that's a very important point. And we used to have, I remember I was told this, because it happened just after just before I joined the BBC, the 1965 war. We took some pride apparently then, or not pride, reassurance in the fact that we were getting criticisms from both the Pakistani and the Indian government. And we saw that as evidence of our balance. But I must stress, and I'm sure Vishnu would bear this out, in 30 years working for the BBC, I have never once been told by bosses or editors, you must take such and such a line. I have always been told, you must try or you must retain balance as well as you can.
So, a very interesting description you've given. I would not go by the other titles that people attributed to the BBC. But I would say that there is a war of perceptions and there is perceptions of war. There are perceptions of war when you speak the truth and people will perceive the way they want to perceive. But when you want to fight a war of perceptions, then you could be working on a narrative. So very difficult for people to understand if you're working on a narrative or you are speaking the truth. So I think it is the credibility of any news agency which would make people actually believe. Now, General Cardozo is sitting in front of me. He was a young major at that time, just come back from Staff College. And from Adgram, where he was talking about in the video shown by Subroto, the last kukri attack in the modern warfare, they were heli-lifted, and troops were being heli-lifted in a manner that Pakistanis could perceive whatever they had to perceive. Ultimately, they tuned on to the BBC. And then they get information that there is a brigade which has landed up there. Nobody knew how much has landed up there. Only General Cardozo at that time, Major Cardozo and his battalion commander knew how many troops have landed up there. I know, my perception is you call them, Gurkha Brigade. So it could be, that perception also. But I don't know how the BBC was taken as that you're building a perception of war by truthful reporting, or according to how this got reported on page 79 of the book, which has been written by General Cardozo. He talks about the Beebs broadcast, what turned the tide in favor of the Indian Army. I know that this morning we spoke about it and we also went through a chapter a bit. So what I'm saying is that if it was so much of the other name that you gave, which I don't want to really say because it's the organization which I am not going to be really talking in this way or that way. But imagine the credibility that BBC had, and you said the Pakistanis did not like the BBC, but yet they believed your information and actually took and made a war plan on it. So I think you deserve that kind of a compliment for this kind of a credibility. And I don't know whether the reporters create a credibility or it is the government behind the BBC organization or the governments behind those who are running the media houses. So any comments on that?
Well, I would simply say it's the BBC. And the BBC is not a government organization in any sense, except that the government grants a charter to it and fixes the rate of, I think the government fixes the rate of the license fee. That's all. So it is, as far as the credibility of the BBC goes, what happened, why the Bangladesh war was so much the BBC's war in a way, was because it came at a time when there was no television and when the transistor radio revolution had taken place. So radio listening had spread very widely. There was no television. And importantly, the only local or national broadcasting which was taking place on either side was taking place through All India Radio or Radio Pakistan. And both All India Radio and Radio Pakistan, although they had some brilliant people in them, many of them my friends, they were forced to broadcast what the government told them to broadcast. And this is a very stupid policy because the Indians and Pakistanis are very intelligent people and they know perfectly well what is government propaganda and what is news. So we got this huge listening and we got people turning to us because the state broadcasting was so bad. And why did people choose to listen to BBC rather than Voice of America or Deutsche Welle or anyone like that? Well, I think one of the fundamental reasons, certainly why they turned to us rather than VOA, was because VOA was a government broadcasting organization. And I suppose another reason why people turn to BBC, but it is only a guess, is because, of course, people associated because of the historic links between Britain and India. But that I think was the basis of the credibility of the listenership to the BBC.
Okay.
And I'd only just add one thing, and I'm not blowing my own trumpet here, I'm blowing the BBC's trumpet. Okay, we were credible, but in a sense, we would not have retained that leadership if people have not believed in us.
Thank you. Thank you,
I
Samar
think, I wish you would say something.
Absolutely. You see, I'll just add one thing.
Yes, Vishnu.
When we get into BBC, and obviously when Mark went there, it was different. When I went there in 1992, the BBC's training prepares you for everything. And while Mark said that some countries like what they hear about spoken by BBC, but we are, in BBC you are taught to report facts and analysis based only on those facts. They do not, like we have these days, take a stand, an ideological stand when you are broadcasting.
So you're talking about the independence of the agency.
Yes.
And therefore, along with that comes the credibility which got established. Whether reporting is wrong or right, it is completely left to a person who's
Perception.
reporting his perception and his observation. So it is not the BBC at large, but whatever information comes, it's very difficult. Yesterday we were talking about intelligence. 40 to 50% intelligence is seen as good intelligence to actually go into war and take decisions about war. So I suppose even reporters have to receive information, and I think they are also under time constraint because it goes into broadcast rather than into a group of few in a tight chamber. So I think it's a great responsibility. I'll come to Subroto. That Brains Trust sits together with the British High Commission. Since BBC says that they have been extremely independent, therefore the credibility. You have, along with Brains Trust and British High Commission, I think they have just let you to do your stuff, and you have gone and interviewed a lot of war veterans of 1971 war. Tell me, what is the impression that you get about 71 war and about the Indian Armed Forces after you have interviewed them? Just give me one or two quick perceptions, because I'm actually going to close the discussion here, we're running out of time, but very quick, one or two interjections.
Well, I have to say two things. One is that it's been a great experience talking to these officers. Without exception, they are big men with large hearts. One. Without exception, they acknowledge the contribution of the Mukti Bahini. All of them. In each of the episodes, there is evidence that they're on record saying that without the Mukti Bahini, we wouldn't have been able to win the war. The third thing is that the Indian military is truthful. There is a 650-page record of the Indian Navy written by Admiral Hiranandani. Now, I don't exactly remember the number of pages, but there are about 60-odd pages on the Ghazi. The Indian Navy says that we did not sink the Ghazi. And it's a brilliant, I mean, if you give it a slow read, there are interviews and reports by many officers. So what I feel good as an Indian, and I'm a civilian, is that I have tremendous faith in the Indian military. Okay. It's a fantastic organization. I'm a civilian. These officers have been most kind to have agreed to do these episodes. We will take it to universities, schools, and the Indian corporate. The people who run the Indian economy should know that they're able to do it because of the Indian military. They don't know. They don't know where Agartala is. They don't know where Changla and Chittagong is. They need to understand, and they also need to understand that the Bangladeshis are our friends. I mean, this, you know, it's a fantastic country, and so I think that's the way I look at it. For me, that's the way I look at it.
Thank you, Subroto. I was just about to say this, that it's a very unique panel, and rather than me talking to them, I will just throw the house open, but for a very, very limited time. Yes, sir, General Cardozo, sir, you wanted to say something.
This is just a 1-minute intervention. Since Sir Tully is here, BBC correspondents are here, I would like to say, comment about what Sir Tully said, what you said, what everybody on the panel has said. When we went into Sylhet, we didn't have food, we didn't have water, we didn't have ammunition, we were short of ammunition, we didn't have blankets. But we had one thing, we had one single transistor. And that transistor helped us to understand that this is what the BBC said, that is the Brigade of Gurkhas, which is landed in Sylhet, a very credible organization which made a very fortuitous mistake, which helped the 4th Battalion, the 5th Gurkha Rifles, to turn the tables of a force which was 20 times our strength. All this happened 50 years ago, but it's never too late to thank Sir Tully and the BBC for the mistake they made 50 years ago. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Brigadier Murthy, sir, you have a question, I suppose.
During the war, I was carrying a small transistor with me. During 71 war, I was RMO with one of the infantry battalion, which happens to be
I can't hear.
Pannu.
Sir, you have to hold your mic closer to...
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not used to. Sorry, I am not used to. Thank you, sir. During 71 war, I was posted as an RMO with an infantry battalion, that is 22nd Maratha Light Infantry, General Pannu's battalion. We were in Battle of Hilli. We entered Bangladesh through Hilli, part of 20 Mountain Division. I was carrying my small national transistor with me, and myself and my bunker mate, Major Inder Sharma, we used to, at leisure time, we used to listen to news. The first station we used to always try used to be BBC. And BBC used to, unbiased, most of the time they used to say, as per Indian media, the report is like this, and as per Pakistani media, report is like this, rather than making it something from
so there was a disclaimer in whatever they informed you about, that this is what they know, and you can make your own perceptions about it.
News, and as per Pakistani media, it is like this.
Thank you.
And as far as Pakistani media is concerned, I am talking of 12th of December. We were involved in Battle of Hilli from 23rd of November till 10th of December. 11th December, Hilli fell vacant. We crossed across Hilli, we crossed Maheshpur Hart, and night halt, we stopped at Maheshpur Hart and switched on the transistor. The Pakistani media is saying the tremendous battle is going on at Hilli, एंड हिंदुस्तान की फौज हलाक हो रही है और ज़बरदस्त लड़ाई चल रही है. We are already 10 kilometers inside Hilli.
Thank you. Thank you, Brigadier Murthy, for your
Thank you so
comment.
much.
As on all television channels, they have a hard stop. So I suppose that is for me, though I have exceeded a little more than what I was given. Thank you very much, Sir Mark Tully, and thank you, Vishnu. Thank you very much, Subroto, for a great perception on the perception of war. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for asking.